Okay, so Amy McCulloch, welcome to the conversation.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. I feel like I need to tell the listeners that we were chatting away.
Yeah.
About completely irrelevant stuff to do with this conversation, but Amy and I were chatting away. But I did tell Amy that I was completely in awe of her when reading up on all her background. So my first question for you is, how would you describe your journey? And I'm talking about your publishing journey, but take also as well, writing thrillers and I say YA and then fantasy, but in the mid, I say in the middle of it, probably around all of that, is being a ultramarathoner and climbing mountains and all of this stuff that just makes me think, Superwoman Amy. It's like, how would you...
No, definitely not. But I mean, I feel like my journey could take an hour just to talk about it because it's been so meandering. And my friends like to call me the queen of the pivot, which I think is accurate, but also like a really good, lesson for other writers as well. I've refused to be pigeonholed into a single genre. And that's sort of the way that I've kind of kept things alive. But yeah, so my journey, wow, it's been a long time. My first book came out in 2013, but I've been writing for a lot longer than that. I've done a book a year pretty much since then. Book a year since 2013. Years. Yeah. But I started writing, well, I mean, like so many people, I guess I wanted to write stories as a teenager. I loved books, loved reading, not from a really young age, funnily enough. It took a little while for my parents to kind of convince me into books. But once they got me hooked, I was a goner, I was like completely addicted. And by the time I got to 16, I thought I'd already missed the boat because I was reading this story about an author called Christopher Paolini who had written a fantasy book and got published at 16. And so I was sitting there at 16. I thought, oh, it's already over.
It's all over.
Yeah, better give up now.
You haven't even started at 16.
No, of course not. But I was furiously writing all through high school and university, and I would write in my lectures rather than listening to what I was supposed to be studying. And I tried to get published while I was at uni, so that was like my first foray into the publishing world. And it was still at the point where you had to send in your first 3 chapters, a query letter, and a self-addressed stamped envelope, send it off to literary agents, and then you would receive back your self-addressed stamped envelope with the rejection inside.
I remember those days. And I always say it got to a point where I wouldn't even bother opening it. Like it would land on the letterbox.
If it was the same envelope.
Yeah, it's the same envelope. It's like the same way. And it's got your submission back in it. And I was just like, I just used to pick it up and just dump it on the lower step. I said, I'll resend it to someone else.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I completely relate to that. That was exactly it. And then slowly, the internet, people started accepting emails. It got a bit easier. But I also kind of, after I'd received a large stack of rejections, kind of got a bit demoralized and graduated from university. And then I went off traveling. And I realized that even though my writing career didn't seem to be taking off, I still loved books and everything. So I thought when I got back from traveling, what I really wanted to do was work on the publishing side, or try and start a career as an editor. But I was living in Canada at the time, and the Canadian publishing scene, while very vibrant, is quite small.
Yeah.
So obviously London and New York are really the centers for publishing. And although I was living in Canada, I had a British passport. So I thought, I'm going to take this opportunity and come over to England and try and get work in London and work on the publishing side. So all of that was kind of, I was still writing, but had kind of put aside the dreams of becoming an author because it felt so far away. I'd received all these rejections and I just thought, it's not going to happen. But a couple of, so I did manage to find a job in publishing as a editorial assistant at a really small nonfiction publisher called John Blake Publishing, who did really Z-list celebrity biographies. And as a Canadian, I had not heard, their biggest selling book was Being Jordan. And I had no idea who this person was.
Oh, Katie Price.
Yeah. Her autobiography. And it sold million. It was massive
Yeah, she
bestseller.
sold.
She sold and sold and sold. I'd never heard of her, but it was a really fun, fast-paced office environment, really small, but very kind of nimble. And it was a really great introduction for me as on the editing side for how publishing works as a whole. Because sometimes if you're thrown in as kind of like an intern at HarperCollins or at Penguin, you kind of only see that one element of it. So if you're in editorial or in your marketing or publicity, whereas I was there, although I was an editorial assistant, I was sat next to the sales guy, Yeah, I had the marketing woman right across from me. Yeah, I was seeing it all. So it was kind of a really good introduction to that world. But at the same time, I had this little voice saying, oh, you love writing, don't give up just yet. And I went back to that first book that I read that I'd written at university, and I reread it, and I could see all the problems with it, having had a year off.
Yeah.
But I still loved the very core of the idea. So I kind of started working on it again, but just completely scrapped that version, but just kept the core idea and the core character and rewrote it basically from scratch. And then I started again sending out query letters, but this time by email. And I was so lucky. This is one of those, you couldn't write it kind of stories, but I sent my query letter off to someone who had an assistant who wasn't quite a full agent yet. And this assistant got in touch with me and said, I'm about to be promoted to become a full agent, and I read your query and your manuscript, and I loved it. And I know I don't have any sales yet or any deals, but I would love to take you on as a client. And I'm going to be working, under my former boss as like a mentor. And so we met up for coffee, and she seemed so energetic and so keen and hungry. And I was kind of in that same place. I was really keen to have an agent, who's not just for my first book, but for a career. And I became the first client for Juliet Mushins.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That assistant was Juliet Mushins, who now represents Richard Osman, Jesse Burton, these huge bestsellers.
I always say that, like, when people are looking for agents, and I say sometimes you need to seek out the ones who don't have a list, because they're going to be hungry to build their list and build a career for whoever joins their list.
Yeah.
So don't dismiss them because they're not already representing the big names, because look.
Exactly. No, that was exactly right. And she was, you could tell that she had not just the passion for the business, but she also loved my writing, which was really lovely. And we had a great conversation. We really seemed to align on so much. So yeah, it was kind of a no-brainer in the end for me to sign with her. And thank God I did, because, she has been an agent for me that's seen me through so many career highs and lows. And we did end up selling that first book. So it was the book I had initially started at university, then completely threw away and then rewrote it again. And we sold it to Random House Children's for a very, very small amount of money. But I was so chuffed.
Yeah.
And that was kind of kicked everything off. And yeah, so since then, after that, it was interesting because the first two books, they were fantasy, but young adult fantasy. And they didn't sell anything at all.
Did you intend to write that? When you started writing way back when, was that always your intention?
Yeah.
I'm going to write children's fantasy.
Yeah, well, because my favorite, even as a sort of university student and everything, my favorite genres to read tended to be fantasy. Well, it was fantasy, and especially like my idols at the time were like Philip Pullman and reading The Golden Compass, Jonathan Stroud as well, the Barthelemy trilogies. But it was interesting because I also studied some science fiction and fantasy at university as part of my English degree. So I read a lot of the classics, Octavia Butler, Ursula Le Guin, all of the big names. And what I found interesting was that, so my mum is Chinese.
Yeah.
And growing up, I had been introduced to a lot of kind of Chinese folklore and fairy tales. But in the fantasy that I was reading and looking for on the shelves, I wasn't seeing so much reflection of that part of my background.
Yeah.
And I kind of had this realization at uni, interestingly enough, at uni, that if I wanted to read it, then maybe I would have to write it myself, which was actually kind of annoying for me because I didn't want to. I just wanted to
It's like,
read it,
oh,
but I was
I
like,
gotta do
yeah,
the work. It's like I don't really
oh
want to
god,
do the work. I just want to
yeah,
enjoy it and just revel in it. But now I actually
exactly.
need to sit down and produce it myself so I can.
Sit down and actually do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where it came from. So yeah, fantasy was definitely, that was the genre that I've always loved. And I loved writing as well for young adults. At that time, the Hunger Games was coming out. It was a really vibrant part of the
Mm.
industry, the young adult space. And as I said, when I started working in publishing, I was working on the adult side, so it felt like a nice kind of separation between my writing and my kind of publishing career.
Yeah.
Even though as a publisher, I then moved into a science fiction and fantasy imprint, but it made so much sense for me because that's what I loved to read.
Mm.
So I had a career that was sort of a parallel career where I was working away as an editor and working as a writer for a while. I really enjoyed the publishing side. I got relatively high up. I was an editorial director at Penguin Children's. Really, really loved working with authors. But then Juliet sold a book of mine, a series called The Potion Diaries, to Simon & Schuster, which again was another young adult fantasy, but slightly lighter, sort of a bit more funny, a bit more grounded as well in a world that was very much like our own. And she sold it for enough money where I could consider leaving the publishing side and really trying to become a full-time writer. And it also helped that Penguin were quite flexible. They let me sort of, I went part-time and then sort of staged it out until I could see whether I could balance both. But I knew that I really wanted to try and be a writer full-time. That was my dream. That's what I wanted to do. Although it's a lot of pressure on the writing of the books.
Yeah, because I've been saying it recently. We've been talking about how, being a writer, it's the only career that I could, well, maybe not the only career, maybe acting, anything basically creative where you can work for a really long time on something, on a project, but there's no guarantee at the end
No
what's going to
guarantee.
happen.
Yeah, definitely. So it's got to this point, and I kind of felt like, I could maybe go back into publishing if it really all fell apart with the writing. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make a go of it. And also, I have to say, I was in the privileged position at the time that I, had recently got married to someone who had a career in finance. So it felt like if there was a gap, then there was a rescue net. That my husband at the time had a solid career, except that marriage then quickly fell apart, and so
I'm not laughing. I shouldn't laugh.
No, I know.
It's like,
no,
it's like in your head, you're like, oh, this is perfect.
We're set. We're done.
Penguin letting me do what I need to do. I can work full time. I got the financial safety net because my husband is in finance.
Lining up.
Yeah, everything's in alignment, and I don't think there's nothing wrong with wanting that or being appreciative of that, because for some people it's perfect, but then you're like, oh shit. So
best laid plans. Best laid plans. And that all fell apart. And suddenly I was facing this future where I was like, oh no, I've only got my books to rely on now, well and truly. And they weren't selling that well. Unfortunately, I had published this really, really lovely science fiction series called Jinxed in the UK. And it didn't take off. And I was kind of facing this kind of open, like, what are you going to do next? They had turned down my next one. So I was in a bit of limbo. And then obviously I was going through personal hell. And not knowing, I didn't know where I was going to live. I didn't know, what direction my life was going to take. I thought we were going to start a family, like, all of these things, all these, as I say, the kind of well-worn path that I thought I was going to follow.
It's like you have, like when you're ticking things off your checklist, you're like,
yeah,
I've got that. Yes, I've got it. I've got it. And it's that last thing. And then it's like, oh, no. Whoever's out there has said, no, we're going to tear this all up.
But whoever's out there also turned me towards this path that, has just taken me to new heights, like quite literally. Because I kind of went on, when I was unsure about everything in my whole life, I decided to go on a kind of a Cheryl Strayed wild journey, I call it, like the
Did you read
walking
Wild?
I did read Wild, yeah.
I think
and I was inspired.
Yeah, I think people did one or two things when they were going through that pivot in their life, is that
Mhm.
you either read Eat, Pray, Love and did the Eat, Pray,
Yeah.
Love journey,
Yeah.
or
Go
you
on a yoga retreat.
yeah, do the yoga retreat, like eat loads of
Yeah.
pasta, do all that,
Yeah.
or you did the wild, you read wild and you went on that journey. I'm gonna get my
Yeah.
backpack, I'm gonna hike wherever
Yeah.
and go and find myself. You
Yeah.
are
That
it
is
was
what I
two
did, but
routes.
I did it to the extreme, I would say. Because I literally the day that my ex-husband said that that he was leaving and then we wanted to divorce, I booked myself the next day on a solo trip to walk in Ireland, a place called the Kerry Way, which is this absolutely stunning peninsula in Ireland. And there's a circular walk. It's about 250 kilometers, but it's really lovely because you walk from B&B to B&B. So at the end of every day, there's like a lovely Irish home cooked meal.
Yeah, you're not in a tent.
um, you're not in a tent, exactly. But each day you're walking, 25 to 30 kilometers in stunning sort of Atlantic coast scenery, and I was like screaming at sheep, crying, but there was nobody around as well. Like, just I don't know. I was just rediscovering who I was, I suppose, outside of this
Was
version that
outside
I
this,
had.
yeah, this, because you become a new version of yourself when you
You do,
become, I say, committed or attached to someone else, and you build this new life,
yeah.
and you have this new group of friends. Everything
Mhm.
changes, and then you have to find yourself again when
Yeah, and
you're.
you start seeing yourself through the lens of the other person in a way. Like, I mean, we'd met when I was really young. Well, both of us were very young. Sort of, I was 21 when we met. When we met, I was 31 when we got divorced. So, we'd done that decade of my 20s together. But it was interesting because I'd never been a particularly athletic person, so I
I was
avoid,
gonna ask,
in
yeah.
school. Yeah, no, and I'd kind of seen myself as this bookish geek, so I didn't do gym class, I didn't like exercise, in theory,
I'm
and
sorry for
my
rolling my eyes. The only reason why I'm
no, no,
rolling my eyes is because I know what you've done. So when you
yeah,
say, "I never saw myself as this," and
I,
yeah, so I
I
apologize for rolling
really
my eyes because I'm like,
no,
really?
but it's true because and even like my partner at the time, he would say, "Oh, we can't do that hike, you'll find that too hard," or like something like that. And it was like I had accepted that that was who I was and never questioned it. And so as soon as that part of my life was gone and I was looking at this new future, I was like, well, actually maybe I can do more. Maybe I can trust more my body a bit more or find out what I can do, and I kept pushing myself a little bit harder and harder. And then I just fell in love with it. I like, especially walking and hiking. Um, that's what I wanted to do more and see more. I went from Ireland to Nepal. I walked some of the, incredible trails in Nepal. And it put me in front of, I met so many incredible people doing that. And obviously I was on
Mm,
my own. Um, and I started to fall in love with the mountains. And it kind of led me on this huge journey, where I met a mountaineer who was about to attempt a world record, and he invited me along to a mountain in Nepal, Manaslu, which is the world's eighth highest mountain. And he invited me to climb that with him, and I did. And it's about a month-long expedition where you're living in a tent in absolutely extreme conditions. But while I was there, my kind of writerly brain was really ticking over. I hadn't gone there with the intention of writing a book,
yeah.
but when I was there, I had some experiences, it was overwhelmingly a positive experience, but I also had some quite negative experiences while I was there, especially with some of the male characters, some of the men on the mountain, basically. It's a very unusual place, really, to be as a solo woman. And after a few of these kind of encounters, I realized that that this was like the perfect setting for a thriller book, basically.
Yeah. I
It was dangerous, isolated, full of ego and big male characters, army men from extreme sports backgrounds, just huge figures, larger than life. Um, and yeah, in a place of extreme danger, just from the natural environment. avalanches, extreme cold, lack of oxygen.
Well, you know what? I just, listening to you, and I just keep coming back in my head too. It's amazing the stories we tell ourselves that
Yes.
stop us from doing
Yep.
anything. So for,
Mhm.
you're going back to, well, I'm not athletic. I am
Yep.
this is who I am. I'm this
Yep.
archetype of being the geek, the bookish
Yep.
geek, and that's all I'm focused on. That's all I'm going to do. And then it's not even dismissing it. It's just not even acknowledging that maybe it could be a possibility that you could be
Mhm.
interested or even be good at doing
Yep.
these other things. And it's probably so many people have just they've either been told this is what they are, or they believe because of maybe the circles they're in, they believe this is who they are. And it stopped them
Mhm.
from doing or just experimenting and trying so many different things and discovering different parts of themselves.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That was the biggest lesson. I mean, obviously an incredibly horrible, painful time, but that was the biggest lesson that came out of that, and I'm so grateful to have learned it because it's something I've continued on constantly, as you say, challenging those voices that are trying to keep you in a
In a
specific
box, yeah.
box. Yeah,
And you'd never
including
yeah, but you'd never had any interest in climbing a mountain,
not
hiking or
not Not
anything.
really. I mean, I was interested in reading about it. I would read lots
Yeah.
of these kind of stories, and always been fascinated. And I loved travel. I'd always been a big someone who was happy to camp and to kind of get out of my kind of cultural comfort zone and experience different
Mm.
things. And always loved some adrenaline. So I'd done a bungee jump and a skydive, things like that, but never anything that was too physically arduous, like anything that would require too much from my body, really.
Yeah.
I just didn't push myself in that way. And honestly, what my body is capable of, and what I feel like now, especially as I say, I've just had a second baby. My body is kind of changing and growing in different ways, and it's kind of such a privilege. Your health is such a privilege. This is kind of one of what we were talking about before
Yeah.
the podcast started. You can't take your own health for granted, and I think it's something that I'm kind of really more appreciative now of what my body is capable of, and recognize how lucky I am to be able to do these things. And I know that it won't necessarily last forever. So I'm kind of just trying to kind of stay as healthy as possible. Keep moving, and it can take you to amazing places. That's what I've discovered.
When you got the invitation to climb the mountain, because
Yeah.
immediately in my head I would have been thinking, yeah, I've walked, I've done a 250-kilometer trek. Like, I'm good with that, and I stayed in nice
Yeah.
B&Bs. I'm good. You want me to go and climb a mountain? Are you mad?
Yeah.
I think that would have been.
Yeah.
But then I also know I've got this part of me that will always just say, all right, let me just see what happens. Which is how I end up in
Yeah.
certain
Yeah.
situations. Sometimes I'm like, I'll just see what happens, and you're like, oh,
That's
why did
it.
I say yes? But was there any part of
Well,
you that hesitated? Or you just no, I'm off?
Um, I didn't hesitate in accepting, because I thought that if worse came to worse and I didn't summit, or wasn't capable, I was kind of there to witness some history being made. So I thought that was really interesting, and kind of such a unique opportunity that it was impossible to pass up.
Mm.
But there was two moments, about a week before going, maybe, and I had everything prepared. My training was basically in the bag. I'd got all of the equipment I was needed. I was pretty much packed up, and I was walking to meet a friend for coffee. Before I was heading off on this month-long expedition, and I had a massive panic attack in the middle of a park, and just had to lie down and like, what am I doing? I'm gonna like die on a mountain.
I'm
I'm not
sorry.
capable of this. Yeah. But it was. I was like,
But I think I'm laughing, but I think also it's understandable because at some point reality's
yeah,
got to give you a kick in the head and you're like, what? Hold on, what am I doing? And it could be
yeah,
the most
well,
innocuous time. Either you're shopping in the supermarket, buying
yeah,
milk, or you're in the park.
yeah, yeah. I was just walking in the park, and I had to call my friend and be like, I can't move, like I'm paralyzed. And I was just like, Amy, what are you doing? Like, this is truly, truly nuts, because it was something so extreme, and had the
Yeah.
potential. Manaslu, it's not a particularly well-known mountain, but at the time it had the third highest death rate. Sorry, I'm laughing now, but because
No.
sometimes it sounds so absurd. It had the third highest death rate of any of the 8,000 meter peaks. So there are 14 mountains in the world that are taller than 8,000 meters. And 8,000 meters, that's the death zone, what they consider the death zone. So anything higher than that is where there's not enough oxygen to sustain life.
Yeah.
So every minute you spend above 8,000 meters,
God.
you're dying, essentially. And Manaslu is the 8th highest mountain, so it's right in the middle of those of that 14. And I started freaking out that I wasn't, that I was making a really stupid life decision.
I would have been the
But
friend. I would have gone with you, but I'll be like,
yeah,
I'll meet you at base camp, and I'll stay at
meet
base
you at
camp.
base camp.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
I'll wave you off,
Exactly.
but I'll be
Yeah.
supporting you in spirit. But
Yeah.
isn't it? I'm sure, was it last week? I read they've had to attempt some rescue. Was it at
Yes.
Everest? Because a whole bunch of people are basically stranded and stuck.
Yeah, I mean that's a that's an interesting story. Yeah, that's the kind of trekking side, because nobody really climbs Everest in the autumn time because the weather is so bad.
Yeah.
But you can still climb the lower kind of trek, as you say, to the base camp and the lower stretches, which still gets bombarded with the heavy weather, and also you're still experiencing very high altitudes, up to 5,500, 6,000 meters, I think is base camp. So it's still
God.
extremely high, even though that's just considered trekking. So it's the environment itself was dangerous. I mean, I went anyway, and I had the kind of second moment. They have a ceremony in Nepal called a puja ceremony, which is led by a Buddhist monk, and it's sort of you do it before you climb, and you're kind of asking the mountain for permission to climb.
I would
And
ask.
yeah, exactly, and for protection, and
Yeah.
you offer up like a piece of equipment to be blessed. And they kind of, it was such a moving experience, because it was sort of under this under the sky, which was so incredibly blue, because they say in the Himalayas or anywhere where you're extremely high and obviously close to the thinner parts of the atmosphere, the intensity of the sky becomes even deeper blue. We had this crystal clear blue day, so crisp cold. And there was a fire, and there were these monks were chanting, and the mountain was kind of looming impossibly high above us. I mean, the thought that I would be up there was just bonkers. I couldn't really
Can't fathom it.
intellectualize the
Yeah.
fact that I would be doing it. Yeah, I couldn't fathom it. But I was sort of sitting there, and I was sort of like, it really helped me kind of like accept that I was going to try, and that was all I could do, and maybe maybe I wouldn't make it all the way to the top, but that didn't matter, because I'd already done the hard thing, which was saying yes and going. And nobody had any expectations of me, because I was so inexperienced,
green.
but so so green, but nobody looked at me and thought, oh, she's capable. I say that, not that it sounds a bit self-deprecating, but I think
No, I get
I'm
it
not like,
though. It's not like you're not known in circles and have been doing
no,
it since
it's
you
not
were
something I've done my
8.
whole life. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I was surrounded by people who were like, I'm going to conquer this mountain. I'm going to defeat this mountain. I'm going to get to the top and like plant my flag, and this will be my legacy. That was the kind of attitude that a lot of the people had. And, sometimes some people, they need that side of it. But for me, it was not about that. I wasn't going to conquer anything. I was going there to see what I was capable of, to try and to kind of just take in as much of this incredible experience, because how few people ever get to do anything like that.
Yeah.
And just absorb it all. And if I made it to the top, wow, amazing. And if I didn't, no bruise on my ego. I didn't
No,
expect
I mean the
to,
fact that you went there, I think that would have been like,
Yeah.
actually, I was given this opportunity and I didn't back away from it. Okay, I may have only
Yeah.
have got a third way up, but at least I
Yeah.
tried. And there's so many people who just
Yeah.
would not, just look at you like you're crazy and be like, no, I'm just going to stay here on the ground.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, having done it, and when I came back, then COVID hit.
Oh,
So any future plans I'd had, to do more mountains or more things, suddenly, like everyone, just the door just slammed shut on all of that. So, but it gave me the opportunity to write Breathless, which was really the book that kind of launched my career in a whole new direction. And I'd never intended to write
it's just
thrillers.
yeah. I was going to
Yeah.
ask you, is like, do you think you would have had the spark for Breathless if you hadn't have climbed that mountain, or you just carried
No,
on just writing children's and YA
I think
fantasy?
so. Yeah, I think so. Because, yeah, I'd never had any, sort of intention to write for adults at all.
Yeah,
Definitely, or thrillers, and but I loved reading. I mean, I loved reading them, but I never really thought that that's where I would go. But as soon as I had this setting, and then the character, as soon as the character Cecily came to me, and how she was seeing the mountain and what was going to happen to her, I was like, I have to write this. And Juliet was really on board, because we'd been we're more than just agent and client, we're really good friends
yeah.
now. And
Well,
she
you've
had been
grown up
following all
together
of
in a
this.
sense, haven't you?
We
You've
have
grown
grown
up
up
as writer
together, yeah.
and writer and agent.
Yeah, we have, and she saw me through all of the kind of, she was at my wedding, but then she was also saw me through the divorce, and then I was at her wedding. We've sort of been in each
Yeah.
other's lives and sort of seen that part. Recently, we both had children at the same time, so it's sort of continued. But she was sort of like, Amy, you have to write this book. This is
It's like, how could you not?
what.
It's
Yeah, how
like,
could you not? Exactly, exactly. And she immediately began talking about it to people that she would, editors that she'd meet, which I was like, stop talking about it. I
I
haven't
need to
written it
write
yet.
the book
But
first.
yeah, I need to write the book first. It might not be any good. She's like, it's gonna be good. She's like, I can't help it. She's like, this is what I do.
You
She's
probably
like,
need
already pitching
some
it around town.
sometimes you need someone else's energy to push
Yes.
you, because you can second guess. You may not have second guessed yourself, going up, making a decision to go up the mountain because you made it. But when it comes to, writing the books,
Yeah,
taking on a new project, doing something different in that creative sense,
definitely.
you need someone to say, no, do this. Like you have to do it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And yeah, she was the biggest champion of the book. And yeah, and I did, and it really, yeah, sort of helped sort of launch my career another direction. And I've loved it. I've had 3 thrillers published now, all of
Mm.
them kind of taking from various extreme things that I've done.
We are going to
I've
talk
got one
about
more coming.
yeah, we will talk
Yeah,
about the
yeah,
extreme
and
extreme
the
because
extreme extremes. But I'm not finished pivoting yet.
no, pivots are good.
Um,
I love it. Last year, pivot was my word, because I've always felt that, especially I think for a lot of writers, for them to get where they are on their path, there's something that's happened in their life. It always comes at a pivot
mhm.
in their life, and
Yes,
it's either for me, I always say is when I took redundancy and I've always written and enjoyed books and writing stuff that didn't go nowhere, but I've never thought of it as a career. But when I had the space to actually think outside my job and
yeah,
focus, I thought, actually, let's see where it can go. And there's so many people, like for a lot of people, COVID, the pandemic was a pivot for them, which forced them to
definitely.
look at themselves and what they're doing, who they're with as well,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
what they're doing in
yeah,
terms of work. You had no choice, because you're
absolutely.
sitting, even if you lived with someone, you're stuck with yourself now properly. There's no other distractions.
Mhm. Yeah, completely, completely. Um, yeah, it's funny what those kind of pressure moments or sort of external, yeah, sort of world events, things, how they can, catalyze different
Yeah.
directions and
You
and
know
decisions.
when you came, just what I was thinking, when you came down from the mountain,
Yeah.
right? And I can't see how you could not. But when you've done such an extreme, and it's the first time you've done anything like that, and you've
Mhm.
climbed the mountain, you've got this book idea, you've come home, does the world seem smaller? Like your personal, or does it feel bigger in a sense that actually, no, there is more for me to do?
Yeah, that was an interesting there was definitely a bit of, expedition come down. I mean, because you're spending a month like in this bubble, and say it's really intense physically on your body, it's really intense mentally,
Yeah.
and not even just the kind of physical activity of climbing. You're also living on the side of a mountain, so there's nowhere to shower. Your food is like camping food, so everything is a bit musty. You're worn the same clothes for 2.5 weeks. Just like everything. And kind of when you are back home and in the real world, and you're a bit like, oh my goodness, like what do I do now?
Yeah.
What do I do with myself? Yeah. And I am someone who seems to be quite goal oriented, I would say. So I was definitely on the hunt for the next thing. So whether that's always positive and negative, sometimes I feel like I should take a bit more time to just kind of sit and reflect rather than constantly move on to the next thing. But that is sort of my nature. So I was actually, because it was pretty immediate, because I came back from the mountain end of 2019, and then I went on a miniature book tour in the US from Jinx, the sci-fi,
Mhm.
but they published it as middle grade over there. So I went on a really, really lovely schools tour, which is its own kind of intensity
Yeah.
because you're speaking to children. They had it on me on a really tough schedule. So I was doing 2 or 3 schools a day, then
Wow.
flying to a new place, and then a couple more schools. And each time, you're in front of a big class, and you're trying to keep everyone engaged, animated. And it's a whole different type of personality. I mean, we could talk about this, I'm sure, when all the different hats you have to wear as a
Yeah.
writer sometimes,
And you don't
you
think
know,
about that. And I mean,
you
you've
don't
been
think about
aware of
that at
it
all.
as an editor, but
Yeah.
as a writer in those early stages, all you're ever thinking about, your entire focus is just on the book. And
Yeah.
even when you're working with an editor and it's going through that whole publishing process, it's still about the book. It's only once it's published
Yeah.
you realize, oh, now I've got to wear all these different hats. Because now you want me to do
Yeah.
events. Now you want me to do podcasts. You
Yeah.
want me to do this. You want me to write articles. You want me to.
Yeah.
You're like, what? It was only supposed
I
to be
know.
about the book.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I say to people, like, I spend, I don't know, 10 months of the year isolated on my own, just writing.
Yeah,
And then for 2 months of the year, they expect me to be this like gregarious, public speaker, and like,
it is a lot.
as you say, go and do live radio or on a very rare occasions. And you feel really grateful, like when you get all these opportunities and
Mm,
everything, but you're also like, oh God, this is so like not my not doesn't come as like really naturally to me. But yeah, it's the part and parcel of it. And yeah, children's books, when you have to go out and talk to schools and you're like, oh my God, now I have to be a teacher and an
yeah.
entertainer.
And you have to
um
you always adapt. I always say when I'm teaching the baby lawyers,
yeah.
advocacy
Yeah.
and communication skills, I always say to them, you need to learn how to adapt. You need to learn how to read
Yes.
your audience, because
Yeah.
your one way of performing is not going to
Hmm.
be a one size fits all. You have to adapt
Not
to
at
whoever's in
all.
front of you, and adapting to children, teenagers,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
completely
sometimes
different.
they would say, oh, you're going to a grade 5 class, so that would be like 10, 11-year-olds, which is great, but that's totally different to a 13, 14-year-olds.
Yeah,
If you're going to someone, those are two very different age groups. And the 14-year-olds, they'd be way more, hard to please.
yeah.
And you have to be a kind of different presenter to when you're doing it to 10, 11-year-olds. We have to be a bit more kind of peppy and excitable.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah,
You
it was exhausting. It was amazing, but exhausting. But I came back from that in February 2020, and then by early March, the restrictions and lockdowns were starting to happen.
Yeah,
So I felt like I had kind of gone on this mountain, gone on this tour, and then
shut down.
was shut down in my home. And I was like,
And
what
it's
do
not
I
even
do?
like you wanted it. Like sometimes you
No,
want
yeah,
the rest
exactly.
time, you want the downtime, but this is
Yeah.
being imposed on you by the world against your will.
Hmm. Exactly. And all of the so one of the pivots that I'd done in my career is, like I said, I had been experiencing a bit of a period of like, uncertainty in my career
Mm,
after that that those books had come out. And I had an opportunity to work with a YouTuber who I had worked with on the publishing side. So Zoe Sagzoella, she and I had remained friends. So I had published her as her editor when I was at Penguin, and
Yeah.
we'd remained friends, and we'd always talked about writing something together. And so the opportunity came up. She was kind of ready to do that. So we had written a really, really fun kind of dark academia, young adult
Yeah.
murder mystery, boarding school, all the things that we loved together in one kind of book. But again, because she's, you know, an incredible, got this incredible following, Penguin had lined up all these events for us, but then obviously all of that, you know, couldn't happen
Mm.
because we were locked down. So it's the whole publication of that book and the whole trajectory of that series kind of was altered by COVID, which was a real shame. But again, all of these kind of negatives on the other side, I was able to write Breathless, and by the time that came out, which was 2022, things were just starting to open up again. And I think my book launch for Breathless was one of the first book launches that my Penguin Michael Joseph, my publisher, had since the kind of COVID time. And we were all in Goldsboro, like, are we supposed to be this close?
Well, I was
Should we
saying
go outside?
I
Yeah.
was saying before we started recording, the first time I discovered you, and I remembered getting the
Mm.
sample, and it was at Harrogate, and I'm sure it was my first Harrogate, and it was a really hot day, and you were there, and they had an ice cream cart. Because all I must have heard someone say there's free ice cream. Like, where's the free ice cream? Because
Yeah.
it's so hot. You're like, oh, there's free ice cream.
Yeah.
And then you realize, oh, this is the whole PR thing. And you saw the ice cream van, and you saw you. And I said, that's why I'm sure that's where I got the sample for Breathless from. And I got the ice cream. And I remember thinking, this is just so amazing. This is like what you think
Yeah.
expect publishing and launching a book is supposed to be like.
Oh my gosh, I know. And that was, I have to say, Breathless was yeah, the dream publishing experience. You know, where I kind of got to witness the full engine of publishing at work.
Mm.
And it was fascinating because you know, I think what excited them about the book was that it had come from such a place of authenticity from my
Well,
own
yeah.
experience.
It's not like if it was me, the only way the authenticity would come from me reading
Yeah.
other people's experiences and literally just going down a rabbit hole on YouTube. Like that would be,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you lived it, breathed it.
Yeah,
Well, you are it.
lived it, breathed it. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and I think that marriage of kind of, author and subject, was, you know, was really fun from a publicity angle as well for the team to work on, and they did an incredible job. Yeah, it's that Harrogate, that was my first Harrogate as well, having always heard about it and, like, kind of
Yeah.
this mythological
Well, I'd
mythical
never
crime
even heard of it
festival.
before.
Did you
Literally,
not?
no,
No.
until I started doing my creative writing MA. And I think it was
Yeah.
only in my last year, and they were like, "Oh, you should start going. You should go to the festivals." I'm like, "What?" I was like, "Who?" I know where Harrogate is, but I
Yeah.
didn't know it was
Yeah.
an
A
event
crime
and a thing.
festival,
No, I
yeah.
didn't know it was a crime festival. Did you you know, when you was writing Breathless, was it?
Yeah.
You know, writing's never easy, but was it easy to write because you had it? It was you.
Mhm.
I'm saying it's not the
Yeah.
characters, you, but you know what I mean.
No,
Like
no,
it's
I know,
you,
but
yeah.
definitely. Well, okay, so it's interesting because I wrote it, and yeah, it was in a way, it did come very easily initially,
Mm.
but when Juliet read it the first time, she was like, "This is amazing, but you need to." It was too much like a travelogue in the beginning. It was too much my own experience, I
Yeah,
would say, to start with, because obviously when you're writing a thriller, especially, you know, and, you know, in crime, there has to be that plot, you know, it has to be
yeah. It needs to be
that
there.
tension, that mystery. Yeah, exactly. It needs to be there. And that was what was lacking. So that ended up being the part that I had to kind of work the hardest on. But, you know, and then obviously when it sold, I had the experience of having three primary editors. So the lovely the lovely Joel at MJ in the
Yeah.
UK, but also an editor in the US and an editor in Canada.
Oh, you had
Because
3.
obviously
I've had
having
2 before, but I've never had 3.
I had 3. So Penguin Canada had their own editorial say, obviously because, well, not obviously, but because of my Canadian connection, they kind of wanted to well, they bought the book independently, so they,
Yeah.
they had their own say, so which was amazing, really great. And it was also the first time I'd ever had male editors. Yeah, yeah. So for the first time, I've had two male editors in my career, which has been really interesting as well. The kind of different styles, but they really helped me hone, I guess, the mystery thriller
Yeah.
element of it. And I think that's what kind of really helped make Breathless kind of a unique, there's, because I always feel like with the crime, especially crime and thriller, there's so many brilliant authors, so many brilliant books
Oh,
out there. And I kind of look in the shelf and I think, oh my goodness, how do you stand out in that
yeah, it's not
kind
easy.
of really crowded market? No, it's not easy. So I guess my kind of USP, if we're going to go into real marketing speak, is to try and bring that kind of authenticity of experience and marry it with kind of suspenseful, thrilling
Yeah.
plots.
Well, before I ask
Yeah.
you about Runner 13, which I'm reading, and you know what?
Yeah. Oh, great.
Well, I'll say the annoying thing is, I was reading something else, and then I was like,
Hmm.
oh, I've got Amy. They sent me. I was like, oh, they sent me Amy's book. I need to start reading Amy's book. And now the other book I was reading is completely been pushed to the side
Oh.
because I'm like, oh my god. Anyway, but what I was going to ask you, about what was I gonna ask you about Runner 13? It's gone out of my head now. So I'll just
That's right.
ask you anyway. No, that was
Yeah,
it. It
I'm
was
sure
about
it'll come
it
back
was
to
yeah,
you.
it will come. No, it was about hooks and things, because you had the
Oh,
idea for
yeah.
Breathless when you go up the mountain. It's like
Mhm.
one thing, it's not like I didn't know
Yeah.
it before, but it really like it dawned, like acknowledged it right in my latest book is that you can have a good idea, you can have a good
Mhm.
hook, but if the rest of it, if you don't have an actual plot, story,
Yeah.
character, the hook means
Mhm.
nothing.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah, that has been every time I start a thriller, I think, "Why am I writing thrillers?" They're so tricksy.
yeah, they
They're a
are.
real challenge on your brain. They're such a challenge.
They
In a
are.
completely different way to fantasy or, other things that I've written. But yeah, thrillers in particular, they can be so knotty.
Mm.
I'm really into that at the moment because I'm writing the fourth one, which I'm sure we'll talk about briefly as well, which is the one that's coming out next year. I'm still working on, which is a skydiving thriller. But I'm in the middle of the real
I love
nitty
it.
gritty of it, and I'm like, oh, why do I do this to myself?
I love it. I love it, Amy, because I know this is all you. And I
Yeah,
just know,
yeah,
like, I'm reading it and I'm like, so I'm reading Runner 13, and I'm like,
yeah.
this woman, I keep looking at you in the picture, and I'm like, this. So do you want to tell the listeners about Runner 13? And then I'm gonna ask
Yeah,
you about
sure.
running the marathon des Sables in the
Yeah.
desert.
In the desert, in the Sahara Desert. So Runner 13 features Adrienne, who is a former kind of professional ultra runner. So she's someone who's broken records. She's really incredible. But she is forced to kind of leave the world of running when she is involved in a scandal with her coach, where she accuses the coach of kind of sexual harassment. But the claims are disproved, and then the coach dies under mysterious circumstances. So in the wake of that scandal, and she believes someone targets her son, her child, in a hit and run accident. She thinks they're all related, and to be safe, try and keep her son safe, she decides she's not going to run ever again. That is until 7 years later, a mysterious race director known as Boons sends her an invitation to a new race of his, which is going to be 250 miles through the Sahara Desert. And he promises her that if she can reach the end of this race that he's set up, he will give her answers as to who tried to target her son 7 years ago. And she feels like this is too good of an opportunity to pass up. So she heads out to the desert with some reluctance, but to run in this legendary race. And the kind of tagline, I suppose, is that she trains for the heat and the sand and the miles, but she didn't train to outrun a killer.
I'm gonna
Dun, dun,
I'm showing
dun.
you book. I'm showing the book because
Yeah.
I am reading
Oh, it's a
Runner
great cover.
13.
I do love that.
It's a great cover. I'm reading it now. It made me I say get rid, put aside the other book I'm reading, right? But normally, the next question I normally ask is, did you face any challenges in writing your book? But I'm going to ask you, did the idea to run the Marathon des Sables in the Sahara Desert, did it come first or did the book? idea come first? And also, why? What were you thinking?
Yeah, I know. It was a little bit nuts, but yes, so sort of. After, as I say, after I came back from Breathless, I was actually going to do more mountain stuff. That was my plan. But then COVID hit. I couldn't travel. So I did what so many people did in COVID, which was just go for a run around the block.
Yeah.
And like to train for mountaineering, you do a bit of running, but it's not really a running specific sport. You just need to walk and hike as many miles as you can. So running was not like something that I was been really used to. But I got into it over COVID. And I started running kind of further and further distances. And I was living in Crystal Palace at the time, and I would run to Battersea Park and like along the Thames and then back, which is quite a long distance.
Yeah, it is.
And I was kind of increasing my distances. And realized that I'd say quite a goal-oriented person. I was looking for that next challenge, and I was watching a Netflix series it was about a mountain, but the next episode was about the Marathon des Sables. And it's kind of interesting because a lot of mountaineers, or a lot of these kind of famous expedition people like Sir Ralph Fiennes and things like that, or Ranulph Fiennes, sorry, not Ralph Fiennes, that's the actor.
His brother.
The other one, yeah, exactly, the explorer one. Sorry, I'm going to blame pregnancy, newborn brain for any mistakes that I make in the podcast. But anyway, I watched this incredible documentary about someone running the Marathon des Sables, and then I Googled it afterwards and was reading about it. And it just seemed like, again, such an incredible challenge, but something in my brain said that I could do it. I could do that.
And
I
you'd
didn't know if I
never
wanted to,
thought
but I
about
could.
ultramarathoning.
Never thought about it before. No.
I know one person who's done an ultramarathon, my friend Andrew, who used to be a barrister and now a writer, and he messaged me, I think it was last year, and I said, what are you doing? I know he runs, and he goes, he lives in Copenhagen, and he goes, no, I'm training for an ultramarathon. And he was telling we were WhatsApp each other. I'm like, and every response I had was, what and why? What?
Yeah. Yeah, it is mental. And I kind of signed up on the spot. I really didn't tell anybody. I was just like, yeah, I'm just gonna do it. And kind of got into this world of ultra running, because it's interesting you say about your friend, because it is a kind of its own unique kind of sport, in that it's one of the few sports where women can perform at exactly the same level as men. So the longer the distance, basically the playing field starts to level, because it becomes less about physical ability and more about mental endurance and about preparation and about, some ways luck, but like so much can go wrong over the course of 250 miles, 250 kilometers, 100 kilometers, that I was kind of fell down a rabbit hole of reading these stories about these incredible women, and in particular there's a British ultra runner called Jasmine Paris, and she had broken a world record in a race called the Spine Race, which is one of the most difficult races in the UK, and she won it. She broke the world record, men and women. She completely outright won the race, and she did it while at every rest stop she was breastfeeding or pumping for her child. So my brain was like, this is like another level of incredible example of how women just like blow my mind with what they can do and achieve. And these stories also, they need to be told. I want to feature women doing extreme, incredible things.
But also, I think someone like you who've come, you told yourself a story that you're just a bookish geek, and it's you in the books and that's it. And then you walk around Ireland, and then you climb up a mountain. Now you it's kind of like if after you've climbed the mountain, I don't think you'll ever be looking at yourself in the mirror and saying to yourself, there's nothing I can't do this.
No,
because you have done it.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. And it's funny because even when I was, getting ready for the Marathon des Sables and getting everything prepared, and I was heading off, and again, I had a lovely dinner with friends, and one of my friends, and I said, oh my gosh, they were asking if I was nervous, and I was, and she was like, well, you're definitely going to do it, because, it's like, you've done so much. She's like, I'm not even worried about you at all. And I was like, it is going to be really hard. She's like, of course it's going to be hard. She's like, you would like crawl there on your hands and knees if you had to. You're going to do it. And I was like, yeah, I am going to do it.
It's just why I said to you in the beginning, I just think you're amazing. I
Yeah.
think I'm in awe of you
Oh, thank
because
you.
I'm not doing it. I'm not even going to sit here and
No.
pretend. I'm not running
Yeah.
across a desert, but I will support you every step of the way, Amy.
Yes.
I'm a
Yeah,
good cheerleader.
definitely.
I'm an enabler. I would sign you up. That's what I would
Yes.
do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You're the one who presses the
Yeah, I'll be like, just
join
do it.
button.
Yeah, just do it. You'll be fine. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
All right. So, Amy, if you could spend an afternoon with any of your characters from Runner
Mm.
13, whom would you choose and why?
Ooh, I think I would choose, even though it's a bit of a rogue choice. I think I would want to spend a bit of time with the race director. So he's the mastermind, and I'm kind of fascinated because there are people. He's not an exact, obviously, he's an amalgam of different
Yeah.
kind of people that I've either met or who I've read about. But there are some race directors out there, people who put on these challenges for people. So it's the people who dream up these kind of
Crazy
extreme.
ideas.
Yeah, exactly. And they're always asking the question, what are we capable of? What is anyone capable of? Or can anyone do this? Can I create something that's so hard that nobody could do it? But then you watch people kind of overcome any obstacle you throw at them. There's this very famous but kind of slightly underground series of races in the US called the Barkley Marathons. They're less underground now because there's been a Netflix series and there's YouTube documentaries. They're out in the open now. And Jasmine became the first woman ever to finish, not win, just to finish these marathons in their, I don't know, 25, 30-year history, something like that. So no woman has ever done it. But not only that, very rarely does anybody finish one of his races. So he makes it incredibly challenging. Things like that are a bit like mad. Like it's 5 loops. You run it clockwise, counterclockwise, clockwise, counterclockwise. And each time you have to pick up a series of pages from a book that he hides along the trail to make sure that you've done every bit of the trail. So if you fell and your stack of pages disperses to the wind, even if you've done the race, you're
No.
out. Yeah, which has happened.
Oh.
If you drop one, trying to have a drink of water and it flies away, gone, out of the race.
That's so rude. That's all I've got.
It's so rude
and disrespectful.
Yeah. There were times where people have run so far off course that they've entered into a different state. But he doesn't send anyone looking for you, until you're gone for several days, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, I guess we better go see if they're okay."
I'm not about no. I am not about that life. I'm not about that life. I'm
But
not even.
I'm just kind of. This is kind of what, even though I have to. Even though I say I have to consider myself one of these types of people, but I'm just fascinated by the types of people who do this kind of thing and who put themselves through it and who challenge others to do it, who dream up these mad things. There's one in Bath, which I have to tell you about because it seems, I don't know that I could ever do it, but it's 100, I think it's 100 kilometers, but it's a 1 kilometer tunnel and you run it back and forth in the complete darkness. 50 times or however many times it is, but that's it. You're in dark for hours and people start hallucinating, they go crazy, they don't see the sunlight. They're just running back and forth in the dark. I know, I don't know, but someone dreamt that up.
I think as a writer, and I always say as a lawyer, I'm always interested in people and what motivates people.
Yeah.
So it is the why, what happened to you? Like who hurt you?
Yeah.
For you to
Yeah,
dream up.
exactly. Who hurt you? Yeah.
I'm gonna make people, and the thing is, people will do it because people like a challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my
Exactly.
God.
It's like takes the Tough Mudder type things and all those little races and stuff to the extremes, And it was really interesting actually in the publication of Runner 13. I had one review that came out and they were like, "Oh, this is unrealistic." And I was like, "Actually, let me pull up the number of women who have run these willingly run 200 miles in a race. You know, there are people out there who are doing this, and even more extreme. I haven't even come up with the most
You know what?
extreme version of what people do. So
If I was you, if I was in that position, I think it would be the one and only time I'd reply to a review, and it would
yeah,
be with a, "Here's some photographs and here's some videos,
exactly.
and this
Yeah,
is me. Mic
yeah,
drop.
exactly.
I'm
Here's
out."
me with my medal. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Amy, because we were saying, and it's true, we can talk forever, you and I. We really
Yeah.
could. So before I go into your last set of questions, two things I
Hmm.
want to ask you about. So you're
Okay.
writing a new fantasy series now under May
Yes.
Goodwin. So how has that happened, and how does it feel to transition now from writing the thrillers to now going back to and is it adult fantasy or is it back
Talk.
to YA
It
fantasy?
is. No, it's adult fantasy this time. Yeah, I know. Talk about another pivot,
I know,
but
we like a pivot.
essentially, yeah, I like a pivot. I mean, but the thing is, the thriller side is going really
It's all,
well.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I really love it. It's great. But what happened was I had my first son, and I had this really curious time when I didn't have a deadline because I had this maternity leave,
Mm,
which Penguin have been. I have to say, I've been really grateful to them for being very protective of my time
yeah.
in the post baby, because it's, you know, when you're a freelancer, when you're someone who has their own business, basically self-employed, you know, you feel that pressure to keep, you
To
know,
keep going, and you
going
need
back
to
to
give
work. Yeah,
yourself
you can't really take
space and rest.
yeah, you can't really take time off. And I don't know when I last had a holiday where I didn't also have my laptop like
Yeah.
sneaking away, you know. But more for me and them. But I had this time off, and then I was like, you know what? I want to I want to write I want to write this fantasy. I've had this idea. In fact, it came to me on the Kerry Way as well. Because I went and visited this place called the Skellig Islands, which is now famous for being where Luke Skywalker of the Star Wars franchise spends his final days. So these remote islands off the coast of
Yeah.
Ireland, really stunning, but like used to be monasteries, and the monks who rode out there in the early medieval period, they thought it was the end of the world, basically, because they were in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. They could see no more land. For, you know, Ireland was there, but beyond that, nothing. They thought that was the end of the world, and that's where they chose to have their little monastery. And I had an idea for a fantasy book that was sort of a bit sort of Count of Monte Cristo inspired, so
Mhm.
like a prison island, and a young girl entrapped on this island, and why is she there, and who's protecting her, and all this kind of thing. Anyway, it's been swirling in my brain in the background all this time, and as like I said, fantasy is sort of my heartland genre.
Yeah.
That's what I read growing up. That's what I loved. I worked for Voyager, who are this HarperCollins science fiction fantasy publisher. You know, I love that genre and that world, but I hadn't had my idea for what my adult fantasy was going to be until this came along. Um, and yeah, I wrote. It came really quickly. It came really quickly, and then I just sat on it. Even though fantasy is having a bit of a moment at the
Yeah,
moment
well,
with
this
book
is an
boxes, and
understatement.
you know, yeah, it is an understatement. Yeah, I mean, it's. But I wasn't, you know, I didn't want to share it in a way, and I was writing it in this really strange fashion where I would write the scenes that I fancied to write, because I actually write my thrillers quite linearly. Like
Mm,
I write them as the events happen.
yeah.
But with this fantasy, I was kind of just dipping in here and there, and which was a real pain when it came to like having to piece it
Yeah.
together
But
to make sense.
I think sometimes
But every time,
creatively, you need those secret, I call them your secret projects. You need those secret projects
secret
to keep the
projects,
brain
yeah,
ticking over in a
exactly,
different way and not becoming stale.
and exactly, that's exactly what it was. And when I was piecing it back together, even though I was cursing myself for being so piecemeal, I would read a scene and I'd be like, you know, I clearly wrote that and I loved writing it. You know, I could tell in my own writing that I was enjoying myself. And I hadn't had that in a little while, because as I say, sometimes I find the thrillers so knotty,
Yeah.
so tricksy on my brain that it's like a bit effortful. And in this fantasy, I was really just allowing myself, because it's a bit of a romance element. So I was really allowing myself to kind of be flowy and just write in a different way, and fantasy is a lot more about world building and setting and character, really deep character development, and can move slightly slower, but not slow, but because they're so fantasies are so long and you have more time to tell the story, you can kind of indulge a little bit more. Anyway, I found myself just loving the writing of it, but not wanting to share particularly. And it took me, until early this year. So my son's now 2.5. So two and a bit years to send it to my agent, to send it to Juliet. And we talked about whether we were going to use a pseudonym or not. And really for me, it was because I still am writing thrillers and I still have that strand. And this is such a totally different strand. I wanted that kind of separation, but I was sort of willing to talk about it with publishers or whoever. But we went out under an open pseudonym, so it wasn't like a secret that it was me. But we used a pseudonym, and it was, again, probably the most whirlwind submission experience that I've had. So Juliet, as soon as she read it, she was like, "We have to send this out right now," and I was like, "What do you mean?"
I love Juliet.
We're going. Yeah, I know. I know. She's like, we're going out like tomorrow. And I was like, okay. I'm really lucky. Like the team at Michael Joseph have really started to grow a fantasy empire of their own within the imprint, because it wasn't really a focus of Michael Joseph before, who were more crime thriller and also incredible women's fiction, stuff like that. But their fantasy arm is now blooming.
I think it has to. Publishers aren't looking at it.
I know, it's where
fantasy arms then. Yeah. Is sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say they picked it up, which was amazing, and a team in the US, and it's changed my life.
Listen, I just feel like I'm just doing like an Amy McCulloch love fest. I just think you're amazing. I do. You know your pseudonym, and oh God, we'll ask you about the next book. Is it part of your name, May Goodwin?
Yes.
So is it you?
May? Is it new? Yeah.
No, is it you? Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's just me saying, is it you?
Oh, I see. But May, it was kind of tricky to come up with a pseudonym. But I used my Chinese name, or the Chinese variation of my name anyway, as the first name, which is the May part, and then Goodwin is my dad's middle name. There's two parts of myself coming together. Okay. Yeah, it's me.
So what's the next book? We'll ask you your final questions. What's the next book about? The one you're writing on? The one you're writing on? The one you're writing.
The one I'm writing currently. So the next thriller after Runner 13 is called Freefall at the moment. Obviously, title's still to be determined, but looking likely to be Freefall. And it's a skydiving thriller, because that was my next adventure after the Marathon des Sables, was to learn how to solo skydive. And I took my son to the drop zone. He was 1 years old at the time. And and I was learning how to skydive. And it was really interesting because it's a different type of adrenaline. So obviously running an ultramarathon is a long period of endurance and suffering, whereas skydiving is like immediate rush.
It's a hit, isn't it? I mean,
it is a hit.
I hope it's not a hit, but it is a it is that immediate. You jump out, you have the rush, and then it's done.
But to me, the fear was so much more visceral than in the mountain or in the Sahara, and I hadn't really experienced that before. I didn't know if I was going to enjoy it particularly. As it turned out, I did. But which is maybe not that surprising, but I did. But it was the most terrifying thing I've ever done. Definitely.
Is it? Well, it's going to sound really simplistic, but if all your other events, your feet are literally now on the ground. You are not on the ground.
Exactly.
You're flying through the
You are not on the ground.
There's stability in the running and the climbing in a weird way.
Yeah. But in skydiving, it was like a real gut churning paralytic fear.
Yeah.
But when you do it you're out there, it is, it's also so overwhelmingly sensory experience, and it is probably the closest to sort of flying and freedom and all of that you can experience. And then when you hit the ground, that's like that was also really scary, because I was terrible at landing until like my last couple of jumps. I did about 25 jumps in total. And yeah, every single one before the last two, I was just like hitting the ground
Oh my
at
God.
various speeds. But live to tell the tale. So
Thank
all good.
God.
But it is, and it's really interesting writing a thriller set in that world, because again, extreme mindset of the people who are there, an incredible experience that I'm trying to share with my readers, but also trying to come up with, as you say, the hook is one thing, but it's all
You
of
have to build
the
it.
character and the plot
Yeah.
and everything around it. And this one has so as I said, the Runner 13 had this strand of scandal and the question of power imbalance, he said, she said, especially in extreme sport, where people are pushing themselves to the limit, what is acceptable, in the bounds of coaching and all of that. So those are the kind of knotty questions that I was trying to unravel in Runner 13, and also women kind of returning to themselves after motherhood and all of those kind of things. So, but Freefall, I'm trying to kind of balance the freedom and adrenaline of skydiving with the sense of kind of enclosure and fear that you get from being stalked. So there's a stalking element. So those are the two kind of counterplays. So
I'm looking forward to
look
it.
out for that. It might not be towards the end of next year, or maybe early 27, but yeah.
Basically, Amy, you've just become one of these authors who are just like now my go-tos. I'm like, I want to see what Amy's up to next.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, final set of questions now. So are you an
Okay.
introvert or extrovert, or a hybrid of the two?
I would say hybrid, or maybe non-shy introvert is what I would sometimes describe myself
Non-shy
as.
introvert.
So
I like that.
I do regenerate on my own, or I find it quite draining to be in big groups of people, but I'm not shy, so I'm happy to go out and meet people, but I do need to recharge afterwards.
On your own.
But again, I don't love boxes, so I kind of like mingle between the two. Depends.
Okay. Right, so I have no idea what your answer to this is going to be now, because you've done all these amazing challenges, but what challenge or experience, good or bad, in your life shaped you the most?
I mean, I suppose the biggest thing was probably the end of my marriage, I would have said, because it was that shift from, as you say, like I say, I've gone through my whole 20s thinking I was going down a certain path, a very well-worn, well signposted road of what life was going to look like. And when it all crumbled into nothing, and I was forced to kind of make my own way in a different way, that kind of changed everything for me. And obviously, now I do have a family and I'm married again, and it's not that I didn't want that path, or that wasn't for me, but I just at that time needed a different direction, different push. It was obviously, the right thing to happen, even though it was painful.
Okay, so if you could go back to when you were 25 years old and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Yeah, same advice as when I was 16, which was be patient. Don't be so hasty, maybe sometimes. I think I was really worried that I kept missing the boat and everything. But publishing is a long game. There's a lot of waiting involved, but also you need time to get that life experience, to hone your craft, and to get there. And as long as I didn't give up on it, I could have easily never gone back to writing again after being rejected at university or something. I could have said, oh, well, obviously I'm not good enough, or that's not for me. But yeah, I think by continuing to be persistent and have that resilience and to keep going at it, I think, and yeah, not be prepared to rush anything. I've ended up with the really, with the career that I have, and I couldn't ask for anything more, really.
What would your 25-year-old self have said if you told them you're going to be climbing mountains, you're going to be jumping out of planes, you're going to be running an ultramarathon across the Sahara Desert.
Yeah,
Mine would
exactly.
have
No,
just
she wouldn't.
would have sworn at you and just told you.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
drunk.
exactly. No, she wouldn't have believed me. She would, yeah, I do think of that I could go back and they'd be like, no, I don't understand. That does not compute. Like, no, I'd probably send myself into like
Your brain would
state of
like
shock. Yeah.
malfunction. Like,
It would malfunction. It would be like, no way. And like, but equally, if I told my 25-year-old self that I would be a Waterstones Book of the Month, or Taylor
yeah,
of the Month, or that I would have a fantasy deal, like they would, they would say, whatever I have to go through to get there, I'll do it.
I love it. I think it's great. Okay, so what is your
Yeah.
non-writing tip for writers? I don't know if you're going to tell them to run
Yeah.
a bloody marathon now.
Yeah, go run. No, I think for me, for this one, it would be try and find some people. Try and find your
Mhm.
people. I think really what's gotten me through so many of the ups and downs of this career and of life in general, of course, but in terms of writing terms, are the fellow writers who I was sort of started out with, and they're especially I'm going to shout out Kim Curran, who is an incredible author. And she's like my first port of call, like, and vice versa as well. We call each other the midwives of each other's work, or she's my right or die.
Yeah.
It's just someone or a group of people who kind of know what you're going through, because the publishing and writing worlds are just so alien to people who are not in
They are.
the middle of it, and you kind of need to be able to vent and share experiences and find out what's normal or abnormal, or realize that nothing is normal or abnormal, and every book is different and every experience is different, but at least you can kind of share that. I think you need that kind of external support, and you're not going to get that necessarily from your editor or your agent, because they have a different relationship to you, but finding your people,
Yeah. I don't
I
know.
would say,
I
is
don't.
important.
I had this exact conversation. I can't remember who I had it with, but it was recent when I was saying to them, you need to find your writing tribe of people, if it's one person
Yeah.
or a group of people, because they're going to be your writing tribe are the ones who understand when you can't get that first draft, that opening right. They
That's it.
understand when you're having
Yeah.
issues with the copy editor. Like, they are all these little things that no one else will get, even no matter how close your friends are and how much you're practically
Exactly.
family. You need to find your
Mhm.
writing crew. So finally, where can
Yeah.
listeners of the conversation find you online?
Probably Instagram's the best one, Amy McCulloch Books. I also have a May Goodwin account there if you're interested in the fantasy side of things. So you can find me on Instagram, and all my kind of book details and contact information is also on my website, which is amymcculloch.net.
And
So.
on her website, you can see the video of it on YouTube
Yes,
of the
yes.
marathon
Thank you for
design.
reminding
I
me.
am going to put the link
Yeah.
in the show note because I want
Oh,
everyone.
amazing.
I just want everyone to
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that video was incredible. I'm really lucky. My sister and her husband have a production a company, and they came out to Morocco with me, and yeah, we got to talk about the book and my running journey and everything in situ, and produce this like sort of mini documentary or mini
It's
trailer
really
for the
good.
book,
Yeah,
and yeah, it was so much fun.
it's good. It's good. Well, that just leaves me, and I really don't want to say goodbye, but I have
No, I
to.
know. I've loved it.
It was so good. It leaves me just to say, Amy McCulloch, thank you so much for being part of the conversation.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks,
Thank
Nadine.
you so much for watching this conversation podcast. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you never miss a conversation. And if you'd like to catch up on more conversations, you'll find them linked on your screen now. And you can also listen to the podcast on your favourite platform. See you there. Bye.